get started with today's episode, I would like to quickly read you our podcast disclaimer. This podcast is for educational purposes only, and it is not to substitute for professional care by a doctor or other qualified medical professional. You should always speak with your physician or other healthcare professionals before doing any fasting, changing your diet in any way, taking or adjusting any medications or supplements, or adopting any treatment plan for a health problem. The use of any other products or services purchased by you as a result of this podcast does not create a healthcare provider-patient relationship between you and any of the experts affiliated with this podcast. Any information and statements regarding dietary supplements have not been evaluated by the Food and Drug Administration and are not intended to diagnose, treat, cure, or prevent any disease. All right, and now we'll get started with today's episode.
Welcome back, everyone, to the Fasting Method podcast. This is Dr. Terri Lance, and I have a very special guest today. Some of you are familiar with this guest and may actually know her quite well through another podcast that we do together. But today I have our editor and all podcast-knowing person with us, and that is Daisy Brackenhaw. Daisy, how are you today?
I'm good, Terry. We were just joking because we're so used to our normal Monday mindset format. It's thrown us a bit. It's very strange for me to be here, front of house on the Fasting Method podcast.
It's also very strange for me not to lead in with, and this week, it's Daisy's turn to share something with us. Daisy, what do you have? But it actually is Daisy's week to share something with us because in the past few weeks or month, we have been gathering some data from you, our listeners. We asked you to give us some feedback in a survey, and Daisy is here to talk about those results, talk about some details about how things work and where things are to help address some of the questions that came up. And we'll try to just fill in some gaps from you. So, Daisy, it is your week to share something with us. Can you tell us a little bit about the survey and what we found out by asking for this feedback?
Well, I was trying to remember the other day. I don't think I can claim it as my good idea. I think it was Megan who came up with the idea to do a survey to actually find out what people were enjoying, what people maybe would like us to do differently, what people would like more of, things like that. So we put together a brief survey and asked people to fill it in. And a very big thank you because nearly 400 people did. So a lot of data to go through. And I love things like that. I like spreadsheets. I like to go through those kind of things. So I found it very, very interesting. So just a few things from that. Nearly half of you out there have been listening since the very beginning. So also very loyal listeners. So another very big thank you. I was surprised at just how many of the people who filled it in had been with us right from the start. So that's great.
That's fantastic.
It's really good, isn't it? And just over a third, 35% of you are also Fasting Method community members, which I suppose isn't a big surprise, but I wasn't sure how that balance was going to fall. It was funny from the start because it's really good when you see the responses come in. There's a spreadsheet that gives you a bit more detail, but they do nice little pie charts. So as they were coming in, as they were flooding in, the pie charts were changing. It was very exciting. And I did actually make a change to one of those, asking you which was your favorite type of episode. And it became clear to me early on that I should have added an option which said all of them. And that is the one that got the most answers. I think it got something 60% of the vote. It got most of the vote, basically. So people seem to like the episodes that we already offer. They like the mix that we have and the length. The most popular length was that standard sort of 30 to 60 minutes. There were a few people who were asking about the bite-size episodes and maybe we could bring those back. And maybe we will at some point. It just comes down to time, really. All of your lovely hosts are very, very busy. So it's really just a question of having the time to generate enough content. But generally, I just like to say that obviously we can't keep everyone happy with everything that they want. But as I just said, the majority response seemed to be that people are happy with the current format and mixture of episodes. There were quite a few people who were asking us to have more than one of you on at once again, which is a bit more how we started the podcast. And that really, maybe Terri, you could talk a little bit about that. That really just comes down to your very busy schedules. And I'm sure a lot of you at home are aware that Megan's life in particular has been extremely busy over the last 6 or more months.
As with many things in our community, one of the things that we are always juggling is time zones. And so we have Nadia and Megan, who I believe are 9 hours apart. Nadia and I are 8 hours apart. Daisy, you and I are 7 hours apart. So any time that we need to do an episode together, it is a lot of juggling of schedules. And as you mentioned, Megan's schedule right now is especially challenging because it's somewhat unpredictable too. So we can say Thursday morning at 7. And then, of course, little guy needs something major at that point, and you can't just clear your schedule for that. So we are going to take that feedback very seriously. It's really important to us, and do the best we can with it. And we hope that everyone keeps in mind that we are always trying to give you what you want and the most of it. And we have to do that within the parameters that we have available to us. So we are planning to make some changes there. We are going to do some solo episodes still. We're going to do some episodes with guests, and we'll go into more detail about this in a minute. But the other thing is we are going to start scheduling some more hot topics because people like that format. And so we're going to work on our scheduling and see that we can get 2 of us together at least 1 episode a month. So that's where that feedback lands for us. And we really appreciate that because it's helpful for us to know. It's easier for us to do them all individually. But knowing that people really get something from the dialogue, I get something from the dialogue. I love doing those episodes. So it was really helpful feedback for us, even if we can't accommodate it 100%. In thinking about episodes with more than one person, it may not always be co-hosts, myself, Terri, Megan, and Nadia, or a combination of, but it may be with another coach. It may be with a community member who has a significant transformation story that we'd like to share. It may be with a guest expert, an author or something, if we can get someone in. So we are also looking at a variety of ways of having multiple voices in an episode for you.
Yes, and that was a recurring theme, actually. People really do like hearing the success stories. So I think it would be nice to rope more community members, maybe even people outside the community. I know we've had a couple of emails in the past with people who sound like they've got really interesting stories. I think they're very relatable. I enjoy those episodes when I'm editing them, hearing people's, real life stories. They're very inspiring and interesting. And of course, going back to my days of Keto Woman, that was all about the extraordinary stories from ordinary people. So I think those are popular episodes, and that's one thing that came across in the survey. And also there's a very long wish list of expert guests and celebrity, quote unquote, type guests, people that we would absolutely love to hear on the podcast, people like James Clear. I don't know whether you can manage to swing that, but hurrah if you can. And I'm sure Terri would be the one who would like to interview him.
But I would be a babbling idiot if I were that one, because I'd be so awestruck to have James Clear on my screen talking with me.
There were a few things that came up that were quite easy answers and things that are mostly available already. So I thought this would be a great platform just to remind people or let people know, even if they didn't, that there are some things that exist already. So someone asked about transcripts. Wouldn't it be helpful if they could read a transcript of the episode? Well, you're in luck because we have been doing those from the start. But that reminded me that actually I don't make a mention of that in the show notes. So you kind of have to know where they are. So I will be updating that in the show description to let people know where you can find them. But I'll also tell you here, if you go to the website, so thefastingmethod.com, and at the moment anyway, you'll find the podcast under resources, the resources tab at the top. And if you go to the episode that you would like to read a transcript from, you'll find that the transcript's there. So there you go. The transcripts are already there. And eagle-eyed watchers of YouTube videos might notice that I also upload the edited transcript to the YouTube videos. So that's an edited script that you're seeing on there. So it goes to 2 different places. A few people mentioned the missing episodes. Those were the earlier episodes, and I won't bore you with the details. It's all to do with RSS feeds and things like that. The earlier ones had dropped off. It was just a number of episodes that appear in the feed issue, and that has been resolved. So you'll be glad to hear. No, we have not deleted any episodes. They are all still there, and they should all be back where they're supposed to be. There are a few people that get irritated with the disclaimer at the beginning. Terri, maybe you could address this. It's not actually too long, so my suggestion always is just to fast forward through the bits like that you don't like. But maybe you could just share why it's kind of important that we put that bit at the beginning.
One of the things we take very seriously at the fasting method is providing quality support and answers and information. And we want to make sure that no one misinterprets that as medical advice. It would be very easy to do that. And so in order to protect you as a listener and to protect us, we don't want anyone misperceiving what information we're sharing and why we're sharing it. So we just ask that you, like Daisy said, just kind of get through that brief disclaimer. Hopefully you've listened to it solidly at least once, so you know that nothing we say should be taken as medical advice. Then from a personal perspective, I might just use that time, if you already feel comfortable and know that information that we're saying, that you use that time to kind of get yourself ready to listen. Maybe if you're driving to work and you're listening in the car, you get your coffee or your tea set up and ready. If you're at home, maybe you get if you're meal prepping, you get everything out and you're just ready to really absorb the content. So just use that extra minute there as a little more prep so you're not caught off guard. I know for me, sometimes I'm 5 minutes into something before I've even really started to listen. So this just gives you that little moment to prep yourself to be focused.
I love that. You can always rely on Terri for a reframe. I tell you what, it just reminded me of, though. It reminded me of the safety information on airplanes. And sometimes they get really annoyed with you, don't they, if you're not watching when they're telling you about it. But it is kind of important information. I understand the repetitive nature. Yeah, I've heard this so many times before, but you've always got the option as well, just of zipping forward for that little bit.
That's right.
You don't bang on about it for too long. So.
That's right.
A few people asked about submitting questions for the Q&A episodes. And I know there's been a little bit of confusion with that because we used to just do it via email, which I have to tell you was a massive pain because I had to copy and paste and read through them and put them on spreadsheets and try and organize them all. And then we got a massive backlog. Anyway, we've kind of worked through as many of those as we can, and we have switched over. Anyone who's listened to the more recent Q&A episodes will know from the beginning of those that we've switched over to a form format. So very much like actually the survey that you've just filled in. Very similar thing, very basic. We just ask at the beginning who you are and where you're from, if you want to add that, and your question. I have put a word count limit on it, but it's fairly generous. But I thought, Terri, maybe you could just share a few tips about which questions we're likely to choose, because that's the other thing. We get so many that we are just going to select our favourite questions each month. But I thought maybe you could give a few ideas about those questions that are most likely to get answered.
I think the first thing I would look for if I were going through these questions is what might be most relevant to a larger population. So every now and then someone will send in a very detailed question about, I'm going to the doctor on the 28th, but on the 14th, this will happen. Which product should I buy? And it's really complicated, and they live in Italy, but they're going to be in Spain during that time, and their pharmacy is in Mexico. And so how should I buy this product? And it's really complicated for us to answer something like that. So again, things that are helpful to you, but also kind of applicable to other people. Most of you have themes of questions that would apply to everyone in this journey. So we always appreciate those.
Well, I think interesting questions as well. I mean, you say about appealing to a lot of people, and I think that's definitely true, yes. But there are some that I've pulled out recently. Oh, I've never really heard of that. I'd like to hear an answer about that. So something that's a bit more unusual that people might find interesting. Mm-hmm. Maybe if a slew of you start asking specifically mindset and behavior questions, we'll have to demand a Terri Q&A episode. So a little hint there, maybe.
That is possible. That is possible. I would also say, going back to what I said about the disclaimer, obviously questions that don't require a direct medical response, because many things that people are wondering about do have something to do with their physiology and what's going on in their body. And so asking in ways that we can address it, rather than, should I change my dose of this? Or when should I start taking this medication? Or should I take this medication while I'm fasting? We cannot talk about your medication. We can't really tell you, yes, take it, don't take it, when to take it, how much to take. And by that, I just also want to be clear. Yes, you can ask questions about your physiology. That's great. Why is it that when I'm fasting, this happens? That's okay. That to me is not a medical question, but asking specifics about medications and will this cure this and will this cause this? Those are the type of medical responses that we just really can't go into.
And we will sometimes maybe edit them down a bit, and or sometimes also group questions. So quite often, it's that thing where there's a wave, isn't there, of everyone seems to want the same question answered at the same time, or maybe it's something that's being discussed around about in social media. So sometimes we'll get quite a few questions coming in that are very, very similar. So we might sort of, lump things together a bit. So don't get offended if your question ends up being edited and or blended.
Another good point about this, Daisy, I think, is that in the show notes for the Q&A episodes, you do include the questions that are addressed in that. So if you have a question you're wondering, it may really behoove you to go through and just look at just the show notes. You don't yet have to listen to all of those episodes if you haven't already been listening. But that way Nadia addressed this back in July. Let me listen to that episode. So it might even help you to know, yes, there's already a resource that exists with this answer, rather than submitting and potentially not having it responded to that month.
And a couple of people mentioned that if the answers were shorter, we could get more questions answered. And yes, good point. We will take that on board and endeavour to do that and maybe get through a few more questions. Obviously, it depends on the question. Sometimes you spend longer, sometimes it's almost a yes-no answer.
Daisy, one of the things, I know you shared some feedback on this when you were talking with me about the survey results, is that sometimes the audio quality is not as good as it normally is, and there's something maybe a little off. And I wanted to just address that from the non-technical side, being on this side of the recording, and that is that sometimes things are happening that when I'm recording, I don't even know is being picked up because some of the microphones are very sensitive. And Daisy does such a good job editing, but there are limits to what can be taken out of the sound. So I just want everyone to know that we do work very hard for the sound quality to be good, and sometimes it's not what you're used to. Recently, someone had given feedback that maybe there was a fan or something blowing in the background. So I have now actually turned off the heat during a recording just to see if that makes a difference. So we really do pay attention. Daisy has, if there's such a thing as a hawk eye, Daisy has like a hawk ear or some other animal that has very good hearing. She hears everything. And sometimes we can do something about it and sometimes we can't. And then especially if we're having guests, they may have different equipment or not have quality recording gear. So again, just hoping that people can get through it. We hopefully never put out something that's such poor audio quality that it's painful to listen to. But just know that we always pay a lot of attention to that and do our very best.
Yes, those kind of comments are always something I take very personally, but Terri can attest to the fact that I nag the living daylights out of them when they turn in a recording that has audio problems. But there are two issues with that. One, we quite often don't know there's a problem until it's been recorded. So the only really way to completely solve it is to make you guys do it again, and can't do that. So sometimes I just have to make the most of what's there. But Terri will be able to attest that I am straight on at you with an email. What is that going on in your background? What is that noise I can hear? Stop it.
Regularly.
Yes. You hear that? Your mic's turned up too loud, or it's too low, or there's this or there's that. So I am always nagging them about it. I think overall, that really just tells you how much podcasts have come on in the last however many years, decades, say. If you think back to the early days of low-carb podcasting, the audio quality was appalling. There are so many podcasts out there now, and the expectations are that much higher. But rest assured that my expectations are also very high, and I do my utmost to make it as good for you as I possibly can. And just the last thing about feedback, a few people are asking, well, how could they give feedback? They actually relished the opportunity of being able to give us their feedback in this survey. But of course, there are ways that you can give feedback and you can let us know what you think, and that's to rate and review the podcast. Terri, maybe you could mention that. It's another thing I've been nagging them about, listeners, to remind you to do that a bit more often, because it really does help from a getting the podcast in front of as many people as possible point of view. It really helps. So it's a little something you could do to really help your favorite hosts and podcast by doing that. But Terri, maybe you could share something about that.
So one, I think you're right, Daisy. It helps get it out there in front of more people through all the algorithms with the folks putting the podcast out. But it also really helps us. You know, when you record a podcast, you're recording, 2 weeks before it comes out, and then it comes out. It is so helpful to see reviews, to see, I shared this with my friend. Oh, my best friend sent me this. It really helps us to know, and it motivates us. It's positive reinforcement for us. So if you want your host to feel warm and fuzzy, please, help us out here. Give us the feedback, give us that affirmation, and share it. Get it out there. Many people talk about how, man, they wish more people knew about this. Well, you can help. You can help get more people to know about this by sharing it, by reviewing, by giving us a thumbs up. Just, you actually help the cause of what we're doing here by giving that feedback.
And last but definitely not least, people would like to hear more from Megan. They want Megan back on a bit more. We have already mentioned that a little bit, but before we get to the last piece of this episode, Terri, maybe you could just share a bit about that.
As we mentioned earlier about the format of the different episodes and things, Megan's schedule is a little more open now that her little guy is a little bit older, and he's not making his own meals yet, and he's not driving yet, but
very cute.
But it does. He's very cute. It does help some with her having some more availability to record. So she will be more involved again, and at first, at least, probably more solo episodes, so more Q&A episodes, but eventually hope to get her back into being able to do some co-hosting episodes. But I know that people will be excited to have Megan back on a more consistent basis again.
And there was another name that came up quite a few times with suggestions for guests they would like and someone they would like to hear more from, and that is Dr. Jason Fung. Well, we have listened, and from next week we will be bringing a monthly Q&A episode with Dr. Jason Fung. So hopefully there's a big hurrah going on at home amongst a lot of you. You will be happy to hear Jason on the podcast. Again, this is somebody very busy we're dealing with. So what I thought might be a handy idea would be to share the Q&A he does with the Fasting Method community. So that's what we're bringing to you about a month later than he does a Q&A every month with Coach Lisa Chance in the Fasting Method community. We repurpose that as a podcast. So I wave my editing magic wand over it and change it into a podcast. And I have to say, he gets through quite a lot of questions. So hopefully that's going to be something that you enjoy on a monthly basis.
One thing that I know people often really enjoy is getting to ask their questions, as we mentioned earlier. If you are someone having some questions that you really would like to hear Dr. Fung's answers, you do need to go over and join the TFM community because you have access to those Q&As first and you get to submit the questions. So as the podcast comes out, it will be coming out after the fact of that live meeting. But if you want to attend that meeting live or you want to submit the questions, hop in and get your membership started.
Yeah, and of course you can watch him. That's a video webinar. So that's it. That's all I have for you. That's the roundup from the survey. Again, I would just like to say a very big thank you for everyone who took the time to do that. I really enjoyed it, and I will continue to enjoy looking through it and putting some suggestions to your hosts for future episodes, guest ideas and content ideas. And it's been a great pleasure to be front of house on this podcast.
Yeah, it's great to get to talk to you again this week, Daisy, and do this today. And thank you so much for all the work that you've done behind the scenes for so long, but also with this survey. Again, thanks to all those people who filled it out. It is really helpful to us. We always want to give the best product that we can, and so when we get this feedback, it really helps us. So thank you. Thank you for being loyal listeners. Some of you who have been here from the beginning, or many of you who have, thank you so much for that. And we will keep going. So fast on. Good luck with you this week, and take good care until we talk to you again. Bye, everybody.
Happy fasting.